My strong suit is being the source of deals.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Step One podcast, where we help you take your next step or your first step in business and in life. My name is Henry Eisenstein, and today's guest is literally one of the greatest investors I know in the real estate space. Make sure you guys are ready to take some notes. I know I am. He has successfully closed thousands of real estate deals across the country, creating profits of over $60 million. Please welcome Dan Breslin. Thank you for coming on the show, my friend.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. Love that introduction. Thank you.
Of course, man. Well, listen, you have like the craziest story on planet Earth. I've read a lot about you, and I'm so happy to be in business together. I'd love to kind of rewind the clocks before you even sold your very first property. Before we get there, I'm curious, did you think you were going to be where you are right now back in like high school and college?
I think I wished I would be here. I think when I was even from 26 to 32 and maybe even 34 or 35 years old, like, no, this was not a goal and a vision. It was like far beyond my wildest dreams.
What was the goal? Was it like to be a guitar player? What was it?
I didn't have to try hard in school, but I didn't try hard, so I didn't get great grades. So I would always kind of like coast by and get a 70, 70s, 80s, CB. If I tried, I could get A's. So I set my goals along the way, kind of with the same mindset and still do today, where I'm probably going to fail and fall short and come in at a barely acceptable passing grade. So 70% rule in the goal setting. And I remember my goal was like $5,000 a month when I was like 31. And I remember I would do like a couple wholesale deals here and there, and it would, $3,500, $4,500. And I was like, man, I can't seem to kind of get there. And then set the goal for $10,000 a month. And it was the same thing. It was like $6,500, $8,000. And I'm like, man, we're not breaking that barrier. Set it to $20,000, $100,000, and $500,000, and kind of going the same way. I don't really do the monthly goal anymore. So back then it was like, how can I get a living wage? And that was the goal. I was trying to pay my bills and pay my child support and rebuild my credit from, the disasters of decisions that I made before that.
I love that. So let's talk about it like this. What was your very first real estate deal like?
$6,000 assignment on a deal in a very rough section of town. I got the phone call. I remember I had like $100 left. I spent 70 something on a newspaper ad and got like 3 or 4 calls off that 1 week ad that I could afford. This was one of the calls. And we went to the house. My dad had to drive me because I didn't have a license from like a DUI issue that I had before that. My daughter was with us. I didn't know that section of town was just like had the reputation that it did until like later in my career. But I didn't know how much to offer or underwrite or anything. And I looked in public records, and a friend of mine bought a house around the corner on Remington Street for $6,000. And I was like, all right, I will make $500 on mine. I'll offer $5,500. Offered that. They accepted. Call my friend, and he's like, dude, I'll give you mine on Remington Street for $5,500 right now. Sign the contract, send it over. The only reason they call it Remington Street is because of all the bullet casings out there when we went down to try to collect rent. You're never going to sell that deal.
Wow.
The mistake I made on that deal was not signing the contract on that one, because I did end up selling it for $11,000, and my buyer who paid $11,000 wound up buying his deal too for $11,000. So I left another $5,000-$6,000 on the table there by not signing it up.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. You paid for a newspaper ad?
Yeah, do you know what a newspaper is? I don't know if all of our listeners do.
Yeah. You paid for a newspaper? That was the black and white thing back in the day, right?
That's right.
The really ugly magazine looking thing? Okay, got it. So you paid for a newspaper ad, and you had people, I'm just curious, what did the ad say? Like, we buy houses?
Yeah, pretty much. We buy houses, sell it as is. Phone number. Pretty much that's it. Maybe there was a web URL in there. I can't remember.
Okay. We're at least coming into like the Gen Z decade. Okay. So, okay, you do a newspaper ad, you get a bunch of phone calls, you go to see the house, and I'm curious, like, what even brought you to the world of like thinking about wholesaling? Did you buy a course? Did you what happened there?
With the DUI, that did not happen in my car. So there was a stolen theft charge for taking someone's car in a blackout drunk. In case you haven't figured out, I had a problem with like drinking too much and alcohol, drugs, like whatever was kind of around. That landed me in jail for a year. It was like 6 months, 5 months on the front end. Then I got out on bail, then went back in to finish the rest of that time once court was wrapped up. So during that second 6-month period, I guess, while I was in there, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. One of the other kids had it on the block. You know, the block is like 100 bunk beds, and we're all kind of like living in there, sort of a low security type of situation, I guess. And then I came home, and it was like, before I did this, Henry, I was a car salesman. I loved car sales. I loved getting the ink on the paper. I liked the negotiation. And most of all, I loved being in control of the amount of money that you can make, right? Maybe there's an upward limit, as there probably is with everything, but you had some semblance of control. You can make a decision while you're selling a car to give up your profit and give the car away and make nothing. Or you can make a decision to come up with some other method of keeping $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 in profit in the car and make your commission larger. I like that. I couldn't go back to car sales having to disclose that I had taken someone's car and I didn't have a license and a DUI, but my dad helped me out. You know, he was on the phone with me, walking me through it, and he helped me out. We ended up going to one of those like Rich Dad, Poor Dad type seminars. It was by a guy, Russ Whitney. He no longer does those seminars anymore. But I remember my dad put the credit card up for maybe it was like $1,000, $2,000 for the weekend teaser. And then you get to the weekend teaser seminar and it's like, well, here's the real one. You're going to, you know, buy the $13,000 to $50,000 package. And we found a partner and went in 50-50, $6,500 each. Again, Dad's credit card. And that was sort of the catalyst because there was maybe 4 or 5 other seminars and there's a lot of value there for us. And when I came back around after going to those seminars, to the local real estate meetups, I had a lot more credibility because of the things I knew and the things I talked about. I was exposed to just a way higher level than in 2006. There's no bigger pockets. There's no podcasts. You know, you're not finding any of this information out in the public like you are now. So it was like very cutting edge, high competitive advantage just to have the knowledge and deal structuring capability that we got from those seminars. So it was that was the long answer for how I discovered how to get into the business without a lot of money and start to like make my way.
For somebody who's listening right now, I mean, obviously you've created incredible success since those crazy times. I'm curious, do you still recommend that someone goes to conferences? Do you still recommend someone gets a coach? Do you still recommend someone, you know, invests the tens of thousands of dollars that you had before they even get started? Is that even something you suggest?
I'm hesitant to say, yeah, then let's suggest that because there's a lot of
random gurus out there.
Not a lot of them are the right source of knowledge. And I think like when I look back over my career, I kind of still stumbled around from 06 until 2012, 2013. That's when things really sort of gelled for me, started to come together. I gave my life back to God, started reading the Bible cover to cover, got clean from alcohol and drugs, you know, since January 21st, 2012 through today with the help of my higher power that I choose to call God, right? So it's been sort of a miracle since then. But I remember looking over my career probably 2009-ish until like 2014. And the thing I came up with was this, like you got 3 major components of a deal. You have operations. We would say that's like property management, construction, getting a flip ready for sale, holding a rental property, finding a tenant, that kind of thing. If it's in a commercial space, then it's sort of asset management, operations. Somebody's got to meet the tenants there, sign the lease, negotiate the lease, claw back the CAM charges. Like you have to have somebody who's really good at all that. That brings value. That to me is like a third leg of a stool, if you will. The second thing is the capital. You can't flip a house that you need to buy for 80 and put 80,000 in it unless you have 160,000. If you have 160,000, you're bringing something of value to the table, and you may not have to do the operations of the property, and you may not have to do what, in my opinion, is probably the most valuable and limited resource that we have. That's number one. Number one's the deal. So if you have the deal but don't have the cash or the operations experience, you should go find those other 2 components of the deal. Some people can do all 3 themselves. They don't have to share the deal with anybody. So for me, it was like, I don't have cash. I'm not this construction guru with great contacts in construction where I'm going to be like executing on flips and owning property at a high level. I was a 26, 28, 30-year-old recovering drug addict who couldn't hold it together and keep a good credit score at the time. I was not great at operating, anything at that point. Obviously, I've gotten better since then, but the source of deals. So if you have no money, most people think the money is where I have to start. I have to find some wealthy guy to back me, and then I can go out and get rich in real estate. And they're ignorant to the fact that the deal is the hardest part. That's why you run the business that you run. That's why I run the business that I run, is that we are the source of deals. So I would say, like, rather than go get coaching and do all these other things, evaluate what you're bringing to the table and then figure out how to like really maximize that one skill set. So if it's deals, you're cold calling sellers and you're negotiating deals and you're getting ink on the paper. If it's capital and you've got a bunch of money, well, then you need to figure out how to properly protect yourself, structure the deal, find operators who find deals. You have to still exercise that skill. I don't just come to the table with my $1 million and put it on black. There's an allocation of that capital to manage the amount of risk that I'm putting my money at. And you could do that poorly, or you can do that at an excellent level and get better returns on your capital. And the operations is no different. A great operator can develop, I think of Saul Z, who I had on my podcast, Saul Zinkavicius. Guy's buying malls, dead, 3, 4, 500,000 square foot malls. The deals are out there. No one wants to buy them. The capital, it still doesn't really take much capital. $2 million to buy 500,000 square feet of property. It's like the capital's negligible. Yeah. No capital gets behind it unless someone like Saul comes, who's a highly skilled operator, who's got systems for cold calling, marketing, text campaigns, email campaigns, like everything you can think of to generate tenant activity and get tenants in there. Well, they still have to do the construction, build it out, etc. So any one of those three is like a whole masterful, there's a master class, there's a master system that you can develop and build and be excellent at that. And I think evaluating your strengths before you come to the table to figure out where you fit in, and then maybe it is finding the right mentor. Maybe it's finding the right coach, but you're like searching for correct books on Amazon, and you're listening to the right kind of podcast. If you've identified which of the three pillars, if you will, you plan on bringing to the table and participating in the game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, like you said, I think you and I have built a great specialty in finding wonderful deals and providing that massive value. So I'm curious, let's dive deeper into that. What strategies right now do you feel like, and obviously I want to go from like can do with almost zero money, right? So not only just the cheapest, but like, no money out of pocket, just easy, simple, maybe something you did at the very beginning besides newspapers maybe, but anything and everything we can do to find deals. Let's start off with like rookie level and then let's go to super advanced. Like what would you recommend?
I mean, cold calling for commercial properties is where I would start if I had to do this all over again.
Okay.
You're not going to go cold call and put a deal together and make $6,000. And it probably took me 6 months to get to that $6,000. I would say, I know you're looking for like lead generation strategy, but if we're doing this for the listener who's trying to get into the business, finding someone who has their door open to be the more powerful partner in the business is key. Somebody who could do underwriting and tell you how much to offer. Somebody who could tell you what's the narrative on how we're making this offer. Somebody who could tell you if we do get it for this price, there's a good chance we could sell it for this price plus some. Or if you get it for this price, I can bring the capital to the table in the operations and I can rehab the whole property. You are in a powerful position when you have a partner with more credibility, experience, and just power to get the deals done. Yeah. You can ride coattails on that partnership and get somewhere much faster than figuring it out all on your own. So that would be kind of my strategy. There's a guy, good book. It's on Amazon for free. It's called Finding Your Edge by Jeremiah Boucher. Jeremiah reads that book himself. It's a great book. And Jeremiah started off kind of like a lot of people, buying some houses, being an agent, that kind of thing. He found that powerful partner, Henry, and the partner was like funding and buying mobile home parks. He said, okay, here's my buy box. I just have to call the 43,000 mobile home parks that exist in the country. I just have to call them nonstop. And he was able to build a portfolio that he was eventually over maybe a 10-year period. At the end of that, he learned the business, he learned the operations, he had big equity stakes along the way with this partner. He was able to do kind of a big cash out refi, buy the partner out and get like a big chunk of his own portfolio that he had put together all along the way without knowing he would be the owner of it someday. And then a few years shortly after that, the market moved and he was able to like walk away from that business and from that portfolio with a $10 million like clean profit check at closing. None of that would have happened if he wasn't able to like ride in the slipstream, the power of this other operating partner. But he did it all 100% solely on the phone himself, calling for 10 years straight, developing these relationships for 10 years straight. And it's like, who did better? If we went to 2019 when that exit happened, this guy started in like '06 around the time that I started. And it's like, who was farther along? Dan Breslin with sending direct mail and like one of the first people on Google pay-per-click, signs, billboards, TV commercials, right? You know, I've done everything. I still do almost everything. And Jeremiah sat there making phone calls for 10 years and had $10 million in the bank in 2019. In 2019, I was nowhere near $10 million in the bank. Our 60 million was probably 2019 through 2024, where we're at today. That's $60 million. There's probably, I don't know, 3 million in the other 12 years before that. So going after the larger assets and investing your time in a sale that has the potential where one deal potentially can like change your life forever. I mean, you make, you know, with partners, you can make $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. There's deals you could put together in this business that may be 3, 4, 5 million. Don't be greedy and think you need to have the whole thing. Get with the partners who are going to like each bring some strengths to the table and to the deal, and you whack it up and you get your, you know, $250 rather, for the $4 or $5 million profit that's on the table. Trust me, it's going to take a team of like really highly qualified people to get $5 million in chips off the table in a single deal. That's not something someone will like march on the scene and do day one by stepping in shit. You can step in shit in single family stuff and like accidentally trip over and make 50,000 and think you're the most skilled genius in the world because you made 50 grand. Repeat that 200 more times, and then you can come back and say you've got the skill set done. But I think that getting with the right team helps you stay level-headed and humble as money comes into your account that has the potential to turn you into arrogant, deluded asshole who's tough to deal with, maybe ruining your family relationships. Whereas being with a group of people who have like already done that, you can stay grounded, you can stay humble. You're not getting, pop champagne fever, wanting to celebrate because you made 50 grand. You're like getting right back to work. You have more of this champion. This would be obviously the right set of partners. I'm sure that there's a lot of partnerships out there where maybe that's exactly what they want to do is go pop champagne and go to the strip club when they make 50 grand. That's not really the partnership I found long-term that makes sense.
So speaking of a mistake you can make, let's talk about some real quick, just lead generation, like 1, 2, and 3 biggest lead generation mistakes you can make.
No one's there to take the calls. So if you're working with limited resources, you take the phone calls yourself. Calling a lead one time, let's say you do, right? They go to a voicemail, one and done. You do a one and done, you're wasting everyone's money, time, resources. Our leads are like $200 to $1,000, maybe even $2,000 a piece. And I can go in right now and find instances in our team where it's been called once and then forgotten about. That's cardinal sin. And then the third lead generation mistake would be going after the wrong targets. It's like I would start all over knowing 15, 16 years, especially in today's climate. It was different back when I got into business because we were like on the cutting edge of all the technology and like the internetization of real estate. Zillow opened its doors in 2006. That's when I got into business. That tool is like the most powerful tool that's in existence right now as far as like tracking residential real estate information across the country. Like we buy houses in California, North Carolina, all these states I've never even been to, and we'll like rehab them and do the whole thing. You couldn't do that in '06. But at the same time, we're in this like historic low inventory kind of scenario right now in 2024, where it's really actually pretty tough to get into business because the cost per lead is very high and you're not going to get as many chances to do deals as I had in '06, all the way through the high inventory market until like, 2018, 2019. It barely started to get tight and then it got tight in 2020, 2021, and 2022. And it's been very tight ever since. So that would lead me to the right targets is one deal that you can make $500,000 off of and be set for 12 months and stay working for 12 months off your partnership share of that $500,000, you're good for a while. Whereas you could do that same amount of work picking the wrong target, which is that house I got for $5,500. And you might have to make just as many phone calls and develop just as many relationships with sellers to get that one deal as you would have to do to get the $500,000 deal. So selecting the right targets, meaning like go after properties where the profit is going to justify the effort.
100%. It's like I was literally just on a training call and I was talking. I was like, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is exactly that. They're just prospecting too small of a deal, right? And then like you do all this work, like you mentioned, and then you make $25,000 or $10,000, and it's like you have to sell so many of these freaking properties, let alone having partners. I mean, to even make enough money to live, right? Versus trying to target a little bit larger of a property, a couple $1 million property where you can make a decent sized spread, make hopefully $100,000 check net to you after any partnerships or splits or cuts or anything. It's like it's a very drastically different thing, and you don't need to sell as many properties to be in a financially powerful position to be in this business long term. So I'm curious because obviously, look, you do residential, you do commercial, you do every aspect of the business similar to me, which I love. So I'm curious, someone who's brand new to this industry, like you keep mentioning, which I love that you bring it back. Like if you were going to restart, would you still focus on resi or would you go straight to commercial?
I'd go straight to commercial. And that's because it's just so competitive out here in residential right now. I think it's overpriced too. And I don't know that the prices are going to come down anytime soon just because the population growth and the demand's there. But again, the commercial real estate off, like, look, it can be done. You can make $500,000 or $1 million on a house. I have not ever done that yet in my career, over a few thousand deals. I've heard of people doing that. It's possible, but I don't know that you can build a repeatable system to make $600,000 on each deal. Being a principal in a commercial real estate transaction, I know many people who do that 2, 3, 5 times a year, pretty consistently, right? So you probably don't have to do that long to be set for life.
I see so many real estate agents where they just get caught in this bullshit hamster wheel, which actually happens, I feel like, to wholesalers. That happens to house flippers. They just get stuck in this one-track mind and they never end up being the one who owns the real estate long-term, which is where all the wealth is. Right. So it's like, you end up being on these hamster wheels of just doing the business through this one track lens. And, 10 or 20 years goes by. And like you had mentioned, like talking about you versus your friend, right? Where it's like all of a sudden he's worth $10 million and, and we're not. Right. And it's like, what the heck happened? It's like, oh, wait a second. I have to get over here where all the wealth is created and get into ownership and get into large enough deals where, if I can become a small partner, a minority partner in a lot of deals, larger deals, there is a much higher likelihood in 10 or 20 years that I'm worth several million, if not tens of millions, versus being on this hamster wheel, still making the same kind of money and killing myself. Do you feel like it's something where like, a real estate agent who's listening, a wholesaler who's listening, house flipper, first time investor, like what's your 2 cents to them? Like, should they get straight into acquiring, even if it's just finding the deal and becoming a small partner? Should they try to take chips off the table right away for the first year, 2 or 3? Like what's like a 1, 2, 3 for that?
My philosophy is to make as much money on a deal as I can, as quickly as I can. I don't know if that's smart for everybody that's out there, because everybody that's out there is not going to have to take 20 to 30 calls this week with micro decisions on keeping 125 deals moving. So for me, it's an opportunity cost. A little bit, but owning the wrong properties can be like worse. It can kill you, right? Here's one of my mentors loves to say, one deal, one time can change your life, and it can make you bankrupt too. You and I are, $500,000 on a deal, $1 million on a deal, and this other guy made 5, and the other guy's setting up for 20 million. The guy Saul I referred to earlier in the episode. But you do the wrong deal. You might even start with great money and be a high income earner, and that one deal kind of
kills it.
Yeah, you're bankrupt from that one deal. You're never going to come back to the till. I used to see people who would flip a house and they would flip 1, flip 2, flip 3, and then here comes 1 or 2. Another friend of mine, Sean, who was on my podcast, I think he lost like 150 grand on 2 of them back to back, and he was doing great on the first 7 or 8 or whatever the number was. And I'm in the middle of I think there's going to be 6-figure losses again, and I've lost 6 figures on multiple deals along the way because we handled them poorly. So ownership, I think, is smart, but it's probably a little more smart to think more in terms of mitigating your risk. So if you can find a deal, bring it to the table. This is what Jeremiah did. Hey, look, I forget his buddy, Dave or whatever it was. Dave, I need 50 grand to keep my bills paid, but I also want a 5% equity stake in this project or whatever it was worth, right? You have a home run smoker of a deal that's a light lift, 100,000 square foot flex space. The rents right now are $4 or $5 a square foot and the market rate rents are 10. And you know what you have, and it's in a decent area that's not prone to flooding or high interest costs or big property tax increases, that deal is like, that's a smoking deal. You're probably paying $3 million. You're doing rent raises and not putting very much money into it, maybe a few $100,000, and it's probably worth $7 to $8 million. You're doubling the value. That's probably worth $50 to $100,000 up front in cash, and it's probably worth anywhere from 5 to 10% equity on top of the cash, just because you found the deal. Like, you bring me that deal, Henry, and you're like, yo, this is just flex space. You know, I know the owner wants to sell. I don't know his number, his name, or anything. And I hunt him down. I'll still pay you out like that if I manage to close that deal. But if the same deal is like $6 a foot rent instead of 4 or 5, and I got to pay 5.5, 6 million for it, and there's only $1 million in upside, and all we can do is broker the deal. Well, that's going to be take the cash out of the property, and maybe that person's included for 5 or 10 grand for bringing me that deal, and there's only 100 in commission to go around, give or take. Let's call it 140. But you might have to split that with the other side. So there's just like a lot less money to go around. So I'm an advocate for taking the chips off the table as quickly as possible, almost 100% of the time. Some of the deals I'm in, the chips are on the table for 5 or 10 years. We're developing 500,000 square feet of industrial, flex, and self-storage. That money ain't coming off the table for at least, we've been in it 2 years. And it's not going to be coming anywhere, even in refis, for probably another 2 years. And if we sell it, it's probably like 5 to 10 years out. I don't recommend that for your first deal.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree with you more, man. Like, it's like, you know, I think even for like the first year, 2 or 3, take chips off the table as fast as you can, right? Build a bankroll where eventually you don't have to rely on somebody else's cash, right? And try to keep your bills at bay. Right. And like, just continue. I agree with you 100%, especially if you want to grow big, you know, like you and I doing, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of deals a year. You have to just have the mindset of like, hey, like, let's take as much chips off the table as freaking possible in every situation. And maybe, just maybe, there's like a half a dozen or so deals a year where we actually think about it more of a long-term play, right? Because we've been taking our chips off the table so frequently, right? Like, it's like a 95-5 rule, right? Like, you take 95% of your chips off the table, or 95% of the time you take your chips off the table right away. And then 5% of the time when the deal is spectacular, you think long-term. But also, it's interesting because it's like, you can, I truly believe, like, I would never think long-term ever, not once, on residential. There will never be a time when I will look at a residential deal and go, I'm going to invest in this deal for 5 or 10 years. That will never happen. Commercial, that is like, even if it was a great deal, I'm taking my chips off the table right away. Commercial, I will, if the deal's spectacular, I will almost 100% of the time try to find a way to just own it for a long-term period of time. You can't think that way with residential. You'll almost, you know, like there's no reason. There's no upside for that, right?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of selling off all my residential as we speak. So, you know, that was the goal for a while. I got to like 59 units or something like that. I think I'm down to like
residential.
Yeah, multifamily, small multifamily, a bunch of houses, and so as they're going vacant, I'm selling them. Just it's an opportunity cost thing because I'll get a property manager. Yeah, but they require these micro intrusions. And I think like to tie in what you were saying about take the chips off the table or stay in the deal. Here's one of the challenges a lot of times a new person's going to have, and I'm going to suggest that you think in terms of risk on the deal instead of how much money can we make on the deal. New guy's like, oh my God, we got this for 300. We should sell this for, you know, we should buy it. We should do 200,000 renovation. We should get tenants and we should turn it into $1 million property. We're going to make $500,000. And then Henry, you and I are like, maybe we should just sell it for like 370,000. We'll take our 70 grand now and we'll keep it moving. And the new person's mind's like, this is bullshit. You know, we're leaving $430,000 on the table. What you and I are making that decision or suggesting and pushing for, let's take the 70 and keep it moving, is the terms of the risk. We go into a deal thinking it's 200 grand, and then the building codes change, and now we have to put in new fire sprinklers, and, you know, the parking lot, and there's flood. Now we have to do a whole new roof, and all the stuff that we thought was going to be 200 then turns into 400.
And then interest rates
skyrocket. Takes us another year or two longer to find just the right tenant. And now all of a sudden we're lucky if we make 200 grand. That's the risk. The risk is all your numbers and assumptions are wrong. And that's why we want to take the chips now and roll. Same deal, $300,000 contract. And it's worth 1.3 to an owner user. And I'm going to be advocating for, all right, we're going to fund this thing. We're going to sell it as is, so there's no construction cost. Maybe that thing's worth, you know, more than that if you were to put in the CapEx. If we sell it on a bad day for 700,000. Very conservative. We're still walking away from the settlement table with 350 after all of our holding costs. Way more upside for the risk of even closing on that deal for a 12 to 24 month period. But you throw in the construction and, that's operations is not my strong suit. My strong suit is raising capital, bringing my own capital to the table, and even more being the source of deals.